Hey, it's question day, and we love your questions here at the KC Aviation YouTube channel and the Malibu Guru podcast. We'd love to get all the questions you got. Send them to clint@flykc.com, or you can send it to me. But either way, we'd love to get your questions, love to talk about what's on your mind, and we've got a bunch of them today. And with me today, I've got Eric Earl.
Hey, Joe. Hey,
Eric.
Pleasure to be here. I love doing the questions. This is my favorite. Well, it's really the only podcast I record on the regular, but I feel like it's become a tradition that we do the question and answer together.
So it's one of my favorites. And this one's actually a little bit weird in the sense that I haven't read all the questions.
We get whatever comes to your mind
Shoot
first.
from the hip. Yeah, there you go.
So that's fun.
Hey, by the way, cool hat.
Yeah, these are our new hats. I think they're awesome.
You can get them. Yeah, you can get them here. That's exactly right.
It's the only way. Come train with us.
Yeah, come train with us. You
get some swag. That's it.
Yeah. All right. You got some questions. What you got?
Yeah. So covering a few topics today. Some M600 stuff. Some instrument rating type stuff. Okay. So we're gonna cover a vast array of topics today. But first question that I've got for you, and this is just kind of a narrative that follows a scenario with a question.
Okay.
So, pilots transitioning from a lighter aircraft like the Cirrus often comment that the Meridian or M600 feels heavy, particularly during the landing phase. What causes the heavier feel in the flare and touchdown? Is it purely aerodynamic, or are there specific mechanical or design elements in the M class that make it feel this way?
Boy, that's a great question. There's a lot going on here. First off, it's fun if you go back to the Malibu Mirage jet prop, which a jet prop's nothing but a converted Mirage, and look at the width of the tail. It is far smaller than a Meridian or an M600. M600's got a huge tail. If you ever want to, if you ever take off an elevator off and lay it on the floor, like in a maintenance shop,
it's massive.
It looks like a wing. Like a main wing.
If I remember correctly, a Meridian tail is 11 feet wide. It's a basketball goal. It's huge.
It may be. I don't know, but I can tell you this. And it's not, to me, it's not whether it's 11, but if you look at a jet prop, you look at a Meridian, the Meridian is much bigger. M600, even bigger. And if you go back to the originality of why that is that the Meridian with a higher gross weight needed the ability to produce down forces on the tail to keep a high angle of attack to be able for the airplane to fly. And then they had to put vortex generators on the top of the main wing and on the bottom of the horizontal stabilizer. Now, what this meant, what all Piper's trying to do is achieve the low speed standards where the airplane doesn't stall prior to the low speed requirements of the FAA. And they were not able to do this unless they produced a bigger tail. So that's why the Meridian tail is wider, because it's a higher gross weight and they had to have a high angle of attack to be able to have it fly. So just simple matter is that a Meridian has more metal back there moving around than the Malibu, Mirage, and Matrix. But there's more to it than that as well, and that is that there are springs that are in the back of a Malibu, or back of all these, that help to balance the weight. And so if you look at an M600, I'm telling you, or an M700, I'm telling you, it is a heavy elevator. I mean, it's so heavy that there's times where I'll train with a client and I'll talk to them about how you really should hold, you're going to let the nose wheel touch, but then you want to continue to put back pressure, not to let the nose wheel come off the ground, but to relieve the weight on the nose wheel. Most of your rookie pilots will touch down, they'll let the nose wheel touch down, and then just let the nose fall. That's bad piloting. And it throws a bunch of weight on that nose wheel. But it's really hard to do that in an M600 or M700 just because the weight of it's so hard. So are there things you can do? And the answer is yes. There are things that you can do in an M600, M700 when coming into land. One of the best things you can do is go two hands. Now, there'll be CFIs that'll argue with me on this one. That'll say, you're giving up a flight control. You're giving up the power lever with the right hand when you come into land. Yes, you are in a sense, but you know where it's at. But especially for say some female pilots that are just not simply as strong, maybe somebody that just has a tough time holding that much weight. If you release the power lever, go to two hands upon landing. Once you've set the power exactly where you want it, and come in and fly with two hands on landing, I'm okay with that, because I would rather you have that kind of control with two hands on the landing and then go back over to the power lever, go into reverse or beta, whichever you want. I'm okay with that, because those two hands on the landing is going to make for a better landing, number one, because you have more muscle holding the greater weight. So I'm okay in that regard. The other one that'll ask is, people say, are you comfortable with trimming the airplane? In other words, are you okay holding the trim in the back position? Again, it's not ideal, but it's marginally acceptable. And the reason why is that if you have to do a go around and you use excessive aft trim and you apply that power, you're putting that pressure on the tail, the nose is coming up
instantly.
You're going to be way out on the go around. So don't think to yourself, oh, Joe said you can just apply all the trim you want. No, you can relieve some of that control pressure. Be careful putting excess and aft trim on the landing flare, but I'd much rather somebody have a little bit of aft trim, maybe two hands, come in and land the airplane in control. That's a better plan than to be just simply, you can't hold it. Because I'll promise you, M600, M700, they're definitely heavier.
Yeah, and the power's astronomical in comparison to the piston variant.
Absolutely.
So you put that power in and it is instant.
Everything about an M600, M700, if you look at the max gross weight on there, it's 2,000 pounds heavier. It's just a bigger airplane in every single regard. And that's all there is to it. So yes, it takes more muscle. It takes more fidelity on the controls to be able to put the trim in and set your power right and do all the, but is it worth it? And the answer is yeah, because M600, it's 700 are great airplanes. But yes, it takes more muscle to hold it. And I'm okay with somebody do it, putting trim in or going to two hands, but just don't take that and go overboard with it, because there is a negative that comes from both of those scenarios.
Right. And at that point, you've made the runway and you can
we're talking about you're
landing.
10 feet off the ground. Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, a go around occurs at 200 feet.
Right.
You know, whenever you don't see the runway, that's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about you're 10 feet off the ground and coming over there and flying with two hands. Yes. If a deer runs across the runway, that's not a go around as far as that's concerned. That's really what we call a balked landing, where you're literally going to, it's a maneuver people actually practice. Go arounds happen up at 200 feet. Balked landings happen because something jumped in front of the runway. A person taxied out onto the runway. There's an interesting video that just came out here real recently of an F-16 that came down to land. A King Air taxied in front, and the F-16 literally touched down, goosed the power, came right back up. That was a balked landing.
Well, it happened in a Southwest flight the other day. NetJets taxied across.
Yes.
Southwest had to have a balked landing.
That's right.
Go around.
There is a thing called a balked landing. It's different than a go around. The whole idea is we got to get out of there now. But the idea behind, if you're 10 feet off the ground, we're really planning to land at that point. You've looked around. There's things happen. Yes. But, we're down there real close to the runway.
Hi, this is Mike Nichols with the Piper M-Class Owners and Pilots Association. I'm here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin at EAA AirVenture. One of the best parts about this week has been interacting with members of the PMOPA, talking about flying, best practices, and all things PA-46. If you're not a member of PMOPA, as a viewer of the Casey Aviation YouTube channel or a listener to the Malibu Guru podcast, we'd love for you to join us. We'll offer you 20% off your first year membership. Please join using the code Malibu Guru. The offer is good till September 15th. We hope you'll sign up on the PMOPA website at pmopa.com. Hope you'll join us, and we'll see you at our convention in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, September 11th through 14th. Until then, enjoy all things PA-46.
All right, our next question. A pilot mentioned a heightened sense of alertness after having some personal event in their aircraft. And now they have what they call a healthy fear that now drives them from being even more precise and proactive in their flying. How can pilots harness fear or caution as a tool for improvement rather than letting it become a source of anxiety?
That's a great question. Okay, there's a statement, there's an acronym, FEAR, that stands for false evidence appearing real. most of the time, the things we fear the most are not the things we should fear the most. If you, certain companies like Six Flags and Disney, they will use this as a way of making money. Meaning, if you go to Six Flags or some amusement park, probably the safest place you can be is on that roller coaster. I mean, you're strapped in, you're not going anywhere, you're not going to fall out. I mean, it hardly ever happens. More people die walking around on the heat of the day than they do riding around on the roller coaster. But the roller coaster makes you feel like you're going to die. It's fast and quick and a lot of moving around, and people are fearful of that. But no one dies on a roller coaster, or extremely few people do. They're harnessing that fear, FEAR, which stands for false evidence appearing real. And I think there's a lot of things that we truly fear in life that give us high anxiety, that give us, that make us not better. It makes us worse. While we take things that are truly, we should be fearing, diabetes, heart disease, cancers, some of these things that are just, absolutely terrible. And we tend to have a flippant mood about it, driving while intoxicated, things that we just should be fearful of and we're not. And then there's things that are truly traumatic events. When this first question at the very beginning, my mind went to a traumatic event. And a traumatic event can create a negative response to it. So there's some things like you put your hand on the stove and the stove's hot and boy, I'm never going to touch the stove again. But you had to put your hand on the stove. And we're not going to teach our kids not to touch the stove by putting their hand on the stove. We're not going to, that would be insane. But we're going to teach them not to. So the question, it really kind of comes to, in other words, I'm thinking as I listen to that question, did they have a traumatic event?
Yeah, and I kind of think in the aviation community, we all know somebody that's had a gear up of some sort. How do you take something like that? You have a gear up in your PA-46, and how do you gain the confidence again to go fly? Because you're going to be fearful.
Absolutely. We have this happen a lot. Sometimes somebody will bumble into a thunderstorm. Sometimes somebody will land at night and totally mess up the landing and just simply say, I'm done with night flying. It comes down really to trauma. And if you have trauma, then really the best way to do this, and this is going to sound excessive, but is get with a trauma therapist. It truly, I've made this recommendation a lot in the sense that we do have I'll have a lot of pilots that'll come to me quietly and, in other words, they're not shouting this out to the world, but they'll come to me in confidence and tell me about a traumatic event that they had. And the answer to this is truly a trauma therapist, because if it's trauma, you're not going to just work it out.
Yeah, and it can be so many things. Joe, I wasn't paying attention and got distracted when starting my jet prop, and I
started an engine.
Well, exactly. I saw numbers that I never wanted to see.
Right.
And it could be anything.
True. I have a good friend that's a CFI and flew a lot of hours successfully and was really good. But they went flying with a certain person, and that person just scared scared them to death. And that person completely got out of being a CFI, never came back to it, is in aviation in a different place. But my point behind this is this person never dealt with the trauma. And I think if you're really, really talking about trauma, then you got to deal with the trauma. And I will tell you, I'm not versed to be able to do it, but I know enough about emotional health and emotional well-being that there's times where you need professional help. And I think there's a lot that goes on in aviation, and most of the people that are in the aviation world are one of these highly successful people that's, going to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and go fix the problem and just muscle through it and power through it. And I'm here to tell you today, there's a lot of emotional problems that occur in the world because they're trying to handle everything themselves and they can't.
And we had a customer recently that had a total engine failure in a Lycoming. The crankshaft bolt failed, and engine out landed in a large body of water. And he simply said, "Hey, I just don't feel comfortable going back into a Lycoming. I'd rather get a Continental."
Correct.
And yeah, exactly.
And there might be a thing, but I'll tell you, that's really, I mean, if you look at the accident history between a Lycoming and a Continental, they're about the
So
same.
wash.
There's not enough difference between
That's
the two, but there's trauma there.
Right.
And that person, it really would help them to go to a trauma therapist. I think there's a lot of, in my life, if you look at my family's life, there's a lot of trauma that has occurred in the past that my family didn't go over until they were able to deal with that trauma. And as I talk to a lot of pilots, I think there's a lot of trauma that occurs around airplanes, either through a crash or a scenario or something they barely got out of. I've heard of pilots that have stalled and spun their airplane, lived to tell the story, but there's trauma. And so it sounded to me like this person had trauma, not just fear. And if there's trauma, let's get to a trauma therapist.
Yeah. Awesome.
Get somebody that really knows what they're doing.
Awesome. All right, we're going to go one more about the M600.
Okay.
One instructor joked that the M600 is a thoroughbred. I use that word because you like it.
That's one of mine.
All right. He said, "You just got to handle her." What does this metaphor really mean in practical terms, and how do you handle a high-performance airplane like an M600? What does it require both mentally and physically from the pilot? So this is a big step for a lot of pilots. A lot of our customers come out of Cirrus or Bonanza or 182, something of that nature, to go straight to the turboprop. So it's a big step.
It's a big step. And what we're really talking about is horsepower. And with more horsepower is more of a chance for you to get out of normal. In other words, you do something wrong with a Cessna 172, and you're probably not going to get too far out of very far. You do that in an F-16, and it could get real ugly. In other words, the amount of power that you're dealing with, when you deal with an M600 or an M700, especially because you're talking about 700 horsepower, you're really talking about handling that horsepower. And really what we talk about is power to weight ratio. How much power is there to the weight? And that power to weight is going to tell you a lot about what it's going to do. Look at the best example of this is look at a jet prop. Jet prop produces 560 horsepower for 4,300 pounds, whereas a Meridian only produces 500 horsepower for 5,200 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And which one can you get into trouble quicker on? Jet prop, because there's more horsepower for a given amount of weight. So it's going to climb at 2,000 feet a minute. You can get into a world of hurt with that if you do this. I'll also say that one of the other things that's arguable, this is real arguable, but the throw of the power lever in a Meridian or M600 is not very far, meaning like if you look at the throw of a King Air, you're moving the power lever a big distance. You look at the throw of a Meridian or M600, you're hardly moving the stupid thing and getting a lot of power out of it.
We show the milk the mouse method.
That's right.
PA-46s. You can't do that in a King Air. It takes a full arm to move a King Air throttle.
That's exactly right.
It's so far.
That's exactly right. Scarily, I had a client, as a matter of fact, it wasn't a knockdown drag out, but it was just a good solid argument. But the pilot would start up his Meridian at the time, started up, we're sitting at idle, and then what the pilot would end up doing is taking the power lever, and when it was time to taxi, would bring it all the way forward, like all the way to the firewall, and bring it immediately back. Now, you do that in a piston, and we're off to the races because it's an instantaneous response. But a turbine doesn't have an instantaneous response. And so it was almost like the pilot was doing it sort of like a cool thing, sort of like I'm going to put it all the way forward and then bring it up back, and the engine will barely come up and you start taxiing. And I basically said, that's crazy. I've never seen that before. It's like, well, that's just what I do. No. The point behind this is that when you're given more power, when you're given a thing, you don't do things that's going to put the aircraft into an unusual situation. And I chastised this pilot. I told him, don't do that anymore. Just bring it up just a little bit. But it was his way of not milking the mouse, but bringing it all the way forward and then back was his way of getting a response from the engine without having to control that engine. Bad idea. Better to learn to milk that mouse is the way.
Yeah, you'll destroy a turbine engine.
That's right.
If you leave it fully at the firewall.
If anything went wrong, then you got a firewall turbine engine. It's running into the fence or whatever's in front of you.
Right.
So power demands a more finesse or more experience or all the above.
Yeah, and that's typically why we say, hey, look, you have, I don't know, just for example, 250 hours. It's probably better you go into the piston PA-46 for now.
Yes.
And then let's fly 500 hours in that, build some PA-46 time. That when you go to a turbine, remember when you have the experience of a larger, more complex plane, you look better to the insurance, and you're not going to take too big of a step as a young pilot.
Right.
So
I would agree with that. A lot of people make a financial decision because it's easier, it's more cost efficient to move from a Cirrus to a Meridian. Now, if you're a 250-hour pilot and you want to do that, I would argue that's a little early for that move. Some pilots will do that, but there's a lot they have to learn about the management and control of that engine and controlling that horsepower. A better step is to go from a Cirrus to a Mirage, fly that for a year, and now go to a Meridian or whatever else. Financially, it's better just to make one move, but arguably, it's better to make a couple moves as you go across there. You're going to lose some money every time you sell an airplane. Most people do. There's some people that win with selling anything at any time. But that transition from walking up the ladder without making these huge, gigantic moves could be better. But make sure you can control that airplane, control that engine.
And I am of the thought that making moves too quick is why we see nose gear collapses. You can financially do it before your skills can do it.
That's exactly right. I think that one of the big problems we've had in the M600 world, I think there's several things that have contributed to it, but this is one, is that we either have vastly experienced pilots who don't fly prop airplanes very much, or you end up with a very low experienced pilot that was trained poorly.
Yeah.
And you really need to be able to control that torque, that horsepower, and I think that lends itself to a problem.
Awesome. All right. Next question. Why doesn't the M600 green line takeoff trim setting change based on CG? When I fly with an aft CG, the nose feels very light and unstable on the roll, and I have to push forward to keep it in check. But if I add forward trim, I get a takeoff config warning. Shouldn't the trim guidance adjust for CG? And is there a safe way to tweak trim for a balance without violating the POH?
Yeah, Piper just basically screwed up with the M600, in my opinion. The range should be not a line, a green line on the gauge. Ought to be a band, ought to be an area. Why they did that, I have no clue.
Well, the King Airs have a band.
The King Airs, just about every other airplane on the planet has a band,
right?
Not a line.
Right.
And truthfully, you do want, there is different pressures that occur whenever, and with changes in CG. And what's interesting about it is if you look at the M700, there's a band. So they learn. They learned.
It seems like a simple software update to me.
It's a simple software update. And if Piper, if you're listening, go fix this. As a matter of fact, make the band on the M700 is not a big enough band. Make it a bigger band. Let the pilot have some choice here, and also make it so that, because you're right, the M600 pilot and the M700 pilot has a problem of getting a config warning and knowing, hey, I've got a lot of people on board. I got more within limits. I've got 100 pounds of bags in the back. I've got 2 people sitting in the back. I'm within limits, but I know as I roll down this runway, my pitch is not going to be right. Well, you've got the choice of having a config warning. No CFI is going to recommend you continue to take off with a config warning. So we got to be within the configuration limits, so we don't get a config warning on takeoff. So we got to be there, which just means it's going to be heavy. And what you end up doing is adjusting trim as you roll down the runway or right after you take off. I think this is one of the places that Piper really could do better. They did better in the M700. They just didn't do enough better.
And while we're talking about Piper fixing stuff, M600 nose gear widths. If you have the new nose gear, Piper just released a service letter about a month ago that makes the nose gear turn radius wider, 16 degrees wider. It's 6 degrees one way, 10 the other, and they made the marker much better. It's an hour of labor. Go do it.
Oh, yeah. And anything that's going to allow you to have a better nose gear, better control the nose gear, have a bigger limit, do it. Yeah, absolutely. The M600 is way too, no steering limit on the from the factory. M600 is way too narrow, in my opinion. You really got to watch what you're doing with that M600.
All right. Another M600 question. That's becoming a full day worth. It's fun.
a lot. M6, maybe we have M600 pilots listening to this podcast.
I love it. All right, Joe. In mild crosswinds, 5 to 10 knots, I feel like the M600 loses rudder authority just before touchdown. As I pull the power back, the plane starts to weather vane, and I'm using full rudder to stay straight. But it still feels unstable. Instructors say my landings are fine, but I want to understand what's happening. Is it normal for the M600, and what's the best technique to manage crosswind landings when the rudder effectiveness drops?
Well, they've got poor instruction. I hate that sounded accusatory, but that's fact. They've got poor instruction. Where they say full rudder authority, they're not putting in full rudder authority. They're hitting the end or the beginning of the interconnect unit. The interconnect unit, if you put in right aileron, it's going to put in right pedal after you hit a certain place on the flight controls, meaning you put enough pressure, you're going to hit that spring. And they're calling that full rudder travel. It's not full rudder travel. It just gets heavier. You're going against a spring. That's all you're doing. There's added springs. So they're simply hitting the spring and stopping. You can't do that. You got to add more. You got to push on that stinking rudder. It's interesting if you do a slip in a PA-46, and this will be 90%. I mean, way up there. Or if I say, okay, go ahead and put a slip in, show me you know how to do that to be able to, we're simulating an engine out landing. I need to get down fast. We're going to put in a slip, which is a great thing to do. Slips are wonderful. Inevitably, 90% of pilots will put in a slip to the place where the interconnect unit gets engaged, and then they'll say, that's a full slip right there. It's like, no, push harder. And they'll push harder. And I say, no, push harder. Shove it into the firewall, and they'll get another 3 or 4 inches of travel. You hit the place where those springs engage, and they think, I'm at the full limit. You're not at the full limit. That's the bottom line.
I think the easiest way to see that interconnect spring is if you have a tow bar, you put it to the turn limit and go look what your ailerons do. You're going to see the ailerons move.
That's it, right.
When the nose wheel turns.
100%. Absolutely. That's a great way to talk about it. And again, the interconnect unit, if you think about it, if you come in and land, let's say I got a right crosswind, okay, wind's from the right-hand side. I've got aileron to the right, that's appropriate, which means if I put left rudder, which is appropriate, but I'm hitting that stop because I'm moving that stop when I move those ailerons over. So you're actually causing yourself to have less. You simply need to get your feet alive and put the nose where it goes.
Yeah, you can feel how stout that spring is too in the ailerons.
That's right.
It's very, very clear.
I will tell you the other thing you can do it with your maintenance facility. Next time you go to a maintenance facility and the airplane's up on jacks, get with your maintenance facility, make sure everything's right, make sure it's supported properly, but get up in the airplane and tell them this is all I want to do, and then go push the pedals with the ailerons and feel that interconnect unit. It's even better because it's right between the 2 front seats. Pull that little, like if you get an annual and you pull the carpet out and all this, go sit up there in the front and look down at the interconnect unit, which is right there. Move it and look at the interconnect unit and look at it as you add aileron and then put in opposite rudder from that. And you'll see how you move those springs and really get to know that. Get to know the systems on your airplane. But when the airplane's on the ground, you can't do that because the tires and the asphalt is providing friction. If you put it up in the air, now you don't have that.
Right. That's great. Another M600 question.
All right,
from Pete. I'm replacing my second de-ice boot on a 3-year-old M600. Number one, I feel really bad. That's quick.
Yeah, it should.
Is that normal? Or are they prone to failure? Also, I get a prop heat.
Hold on, de-ice boot on the prop?
Yeah, I assume prop because the next part is about a prop.
Okay.
All right. Also, I often get a prop heat cast warning right after landing. If I cycle the switch, it resets and works fine. Could this be a momentary power issue from the alternators or a glitch in the air-to-ground logic? It's consistent and repeatable, so I'm not too worried. Just curious if you've seen this before.
Okay, a lot is happening when you talk about prop heat. A whole lot's happening there. Think about a spinning prop, and if you look behind the prop, you'll find a plate that is copper or copper
You got
colored.
brushes and you got lots of stuff moving.
There's a whole bunch
Wires.
happening.
It's very complex. It's interesting.
Yes, it's very. And the other thing that there is there's a little block that basically holds the electrodes that go, the brushes that go against the copper rings as they're turning. And there's a bolt that goes through there. Inevitably, that bolt is over tightened. And what ends up happening, because those brushes should be able to move in and out, but mechanics will bind those by putting too much pressure, and they don't get to move back and forth as they wish. Each individual one, they have to move back either collectively or they just don't move at all. And so you can that's the first place I'm looking are those brushes not allowed to touch appropriately on the rings? That's the first place I'm looking. Second place I'm looking is just as far as the electrons getting to the boots, is yes, two boots in 3 years is too much. And so you need to get with your mechanic and go find out what's going on. There's something else going on in the system there that is absolutely not normal. A prop should be able to run that system without any trouble whatsoever.
It should last until the overhaul, most likely.
Absolutely.
Or the majority of them should.
And let me say another thing that I think pilots should do. Most pilots turn on the prop heat way too little. Okay. That prop heat is designed to last the life of the boot all the way from day one to overhaul. If you ran it all the time that you're flying, should have no trouble whatsoever. And I think what a lot of people do is just never turn it on. And so this is just like every other mechanical device that's out there. Run it. Run some electrons through the system. Let that thing actually operate. I think you'll actually end up at a place where if you operate the system, it'll actually, when you're ready to use the system, it'll actually work.
We say this about everything. Run your pneumatic boots.
Absolutely.
Get them moving. It's good for them. It's good for the plumbing. It's good for the valves. It's good for all of that stuff to work. And so while you're flying, push the buttons. Make the systems work.
There's two things that'll kill your airplane and kill the systems on your airplane, and that's abuse and disuse. Exercise it. Abuse and disuse, they'll hurt the airplane about the same. So I think that they're probably not run. It does not offend me for you to run the prop heat more. So
awesome.
And you're already, and so you even think you might be in icing conditions. You even think you might be flying through a cloud. Turn it on. You're not hurting anything. I mean, especially in a Meridian, M600, M700, where you have a gob of electrical power available to you. Just turn it on. Just turn it on.
So we've got a gentleman from Europe, and he's been struggling to find the time to get his instrument rating done. He's about 270 hours in, and he's trying to understand a great way to kind of come to the U.S. and expedite his instrument rating, both an FAA and EASA rated pilot, but wants to expedite the FAA instrument rating.
Okay.
How can he do this?
Okay, there's interestingly, I was at Oshkosh and here last week, so that times this podcast. There's a guy named Doug Smith, and Doug is part of a company called EZIFR. Okay, EZIFR.com. Cool company. Their whole job is to when pilots are having trouble finishing the rating. In other words, they work throughout the day. They go to the airport in the evening or the mornings, and they're getting some training, but it's not sustained enough and it's not long enough. There's gaps in their training, and they're not making progress anymore. To use a football analogy, they're moving the football up the field, but they're not putting the stinking football in the end zone. They get in the red zone, they never score, never finish the job. A place like Easy IFR, they're over in Natchez, Mississippi. I went to their booth and got to see all these guys, and it just made me think, okay, this is a great place for people to go. Really high levels of training, but their whole goal is to finish the rating, whether it's private instrument, commercial, wherever it happens to be. This is one of those that is not one of those 10-day do everything type courses, which I'm lukewarm about. But this is one where whatever you're doing, you're training at your local airport, and either you got a CFI that doesn't know what to do, or you just got a situation that's not working. You can't, when you leave work, you're not really leaving work, you're not studying. This is a place for you to get away, go to Natchez, Mississippi, fly your airplane, fly their airplane. But the whole idea is it's immersive. In other words, you're just immersing yourself in this.
Put away the distractions.
Getting rid of all the distractions, and you're able to focus on just that. And they also plan this is how I know about them, because I'm a DPE. They'll plan a DPE for a particular day. And so when you go there knowing your ride's happening in 6 days, and their job's to get you to that place. So they're just a company that's really, really good at finishing somebody up. And so if what you're doing is not working, then by definition, if you keep doing it, it's insane. It's insanity. So we got to do something different. And a good place to go is a place like Easy IFR, or if it's got to be one where you just, I'm taking 2 weeks of vacation, and instead of going to the Bahamas, we're going to finish up an IFR rating, whatever you got to do. But the idea is whatever you're doing, change it, do something different. Usually it's distractions. Usually it's, something of that nature, just your lack of commitment to the process.
All right, Joe, another question for you. There's a pilot, 65 years old, has spent basically a full career as an airline pilot and is about to finish up his time.
About to retire.
Aging out, yeah. 15,000 total hours. And he's basically he's not flown general aviation in a long time and thinks the PA-46 could be a fit and wants to know, is it affordable? What are your thoughts on that?
He's probably asking two questions. He's probably wanting to know, is it affordable? Probably also want to know, can he do it? And I assume it's a he. We'll make that assumption. I'll use that pronoun. How about that? The quick answer is, I'll address can he do it first. And the quick answer is maybe. I will tell you this, and this is going to sound bad. I'm going to get a lot of hate mail from airline pilots, but I will tell you, not all airline pilots are that good of pilots. They're really, really good program managers, pushing buttons and making things go. And a lot of, especially the long haul pilots that haven't, matter of fact, if you handed an airline pilot a Cessna 182 and said, go flying, it would be an emergency procedure from the very beginning.
Give them a challenge of flying a hand-flown instrument approach.
A hand-flown instrument, yeah. Well, they could probably do that, but not on these smaller airplanes. And one of the problems that we've got in this PA-46 world is sometimes we'll end up with a pilot coming into this world thinking that, I've got 15,000 hours, everything's going to be easy, and it's all going to be fine and lovely. And it's not. They stumble and have trouble because they haven't flown an airplane with a prop on it and all the things that come with a prop. I mean, jet engines don't have torque. Well, they don't even know what their feet are for sometimes because they haven't flown that long. So if you're one of these pilots that's flown your jet and that's it for a career, and now you're thinking you're just going to bebop back into the piston world and everything's going to be fine, probably not going to be that easy. Especially if you come in with a real cocky attitude like you're God's gift to aviation and you can't receive training. We see this a bunch where some airline pilots come in here and they think that they're God's gift to aviation, and it doesn't work out that way. We sometimes have to talk to them about eating some humble pie, and most of them are able to do that, and most of them aren't that way. But we see it enough that I got to say it. So if you're that pilot, you expect the transition over to be rather challenging because you got to go figure out what your feet are for, and you got to learn to fly an airplane that's not as stable and easy to fly as a jet, a big jet especially. So thing one, it might be a little harder than you think. thing too concerning cost, I can totally see it. We get a lot of airline pilots that come over. They're making the really good money, and when they retire, they're now going to be on a fixed income. It may, their retirement plan, and so they're very interested in that. But they're interested in staying and flying and staying in the cost. We see it a lot, and this part of it can surprise them because if you're in the piston world, the chances of there being this big gigantic ticket is pretty small. But in the turbine world, there can be some big gigantic hickeys that come along. If you hot start your engine and you got to write a $250,000 check to get that repaired, that'll make you choke. That'll make you spit. So that's just terrible. Piston world rarely has that. You get some big expenses, like if you have to do a top overhaul, it's going to be, $30,000, $35,000. But I would say short of you having an expense related to poor airmanship, in other words, like a nose gear collapse or something crazy along this line, I think you can plan to spend, and assuming you're flying 100 hours a year or more, you're probably going to spend $50,000 flying that airplane, from everything related to it, from assuming you live in a non-egregiously hangared place. If you live in the middle of New York City, you're going to spend more. Los Angeles, you're going to spend more. In East Texas is not big,
It's super cheap.
super cheap.
Orlando, $2,500 a month.
Yeah, we have some clients in here today. They're from Orlando, $2,500 a month for a PA-46 hangar. Here in little old Lufkin, Texas, it'd be $300.
Right.
Big difference there. So, 50,000 is a really rough number, but you're probably going to spend 20,000 on the annual event ish. Could be a lot of play in that number, and then the rest of, hangar, training,
Insurance.
fuel, insurance, all that kind of stuff is what's going to eat up the other stuff. You fly more, a little bit more. You fly less, a little bit less. But you need to plan on spending $50,000 a year if you're going to get into this game. That's probably and more for the M600, M700, less for Continental Malibu, but not real far as that's concerned. So yes, the expenses can be higher, but I would say $20,000 for the annual on a PA-46 is a good ballpark number. It's going to be more or less,
And you're probably $15,000 for insurance in a $600,000 Malibu.
Yeah.
Or Mirage.
Yeah.
Somewhere
and
in that ballpark.
going down, and hangar, go figure out what a hangar costs at your home airport and do the math. The way we do costs is by the cost per hour of flight time. But the question is it worth it? And the answer is, if you've got a career in the cockpit and you want to keep flying, the answer is, yeah, it's worth it. You got a set of wings. You get to go, who wants to go get on an airliner once you've retired? I wouldn't want to, unless you're going a long way. But if I could fly myself in a PA-46, I'm doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
absolutely.
Airline pilots make good money usually. And so flying is a good thing to keep those skills going and keep it going. At 65, he's still very insurable, assuming there's no other mitigating factors. And the question is, would I do it? And the answer is yes. I would definitely keep an eye to the costs. And I would definitely keep a humble attitude as you come to training. We love your questions at the KC Aviation YouTube channel and the Malibu Guru podcast. We'd love to get your questions. Joe at flykc.com or Clint at flykc.com is a great place to send those in. When we get those questions, we will deal with them. And we appreciate you listening to the Malibu Guru podcast and the KC Aviation YouTube channel.